RayPack Studio webinar today. This is Raynet Paderborn calling, and we have a very international round today, so I can actually say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the participants. Yes, we would like to show you the new highlights that we have included in the RayPack Studio product, our tool set for software packaging. And I would like to let you know what the agenda is for today, just to give you a brief overview. There will be a short intro from my side, just to give you a brief overview on our concept for enterprise application lifecycle management. And then I will hand over to my colleague Martin, who is going to give you the deep dive into our products. We then have a Q&A session, and from an organizational point of view, whenever you have a question, you can let us know. We are the chat panel, and we will then address your questions either during the presentation or afterwards, depending on how the flow is going at the moment. So, and all participants are muted during the session, and this is why we for sure use the chat channel for communication. We will also record this session, so we can make it available to your colleagues afterwards, or for interested participants but who could not really join the session. And we will also let you have the presentation that we are going through today by email. So, yes, this is how our product was known, our tool set for software packaging, until the 12th of December. And then we released the new version 5.1, which we will be looking at today, on the 12th of December, and decided at the same time to rename the packaging suite to become RayPack Studio. Now, there is two reasons for it, really. To give it a Ray branding, which means that, as you can see here, the products, the Raynet products normally have a Ray at the front, so RayPack Studio also has that now. And also because we found RayPack, the packaging tool itself, to be like the centerpiece of our tool set for packaging. So the next slide is always very important to show from my side, because it gives you an idea of what business units Raynet operates. In the center, you can see the software packaging phases that we find very important. There is evaluation, which is like a pre-packaging phase, which makes sure that the installation of a software package is documented, so that the software packager who does the packaging knows exactly what to do with the package. And there is no questions on his side, because this saves you time. The next phase is quality assurance, which is also very important and actually checks the test criteria plan that was already defined in the evaluation phase. And we also have a tool for application compatibility testing and for collision management, and that's the RayQC Advanced. So depending upon the addition of RayPack Studio that you would like to use, you have these components included. There's also RayFlow, which is our workflow tool, and which integrates all phases from the business unit's license management, software packaging, and deployment, and transports information and documentation from phase to phase. Now, RayFlow will not be addressed in our presentation today, because we will actually look at the new features and functions regarding RayEval, RayPack, and RayQC. And we have the package store, which can be used to order pre-configured software packages. This can all be integrated into a concept according to the customer's requirements, really. Now, looking at the products that are included in the RayPack Studio, and depending upon the edition that we are looking at, which is the standard, the professional, the enterprise, and the complete edition, we have RayPack, which is what Martin will be showing us later in detail, our software packaging tool, also including the virtualization module. RayEval, which is chronologically placed before RayPack, which is there to document an installation and to also include the test criteria plan, which will be carried out in the RayQC phase. Quality assurance carried out by our quality assurance tool based upon checklists. And RayQC as I just mentioned, for application readiness, application compatibility testing, and also conflict management. So this leads our way to RayPack Studio, and the components of RayPack itself are the ones that are listed over here, which are the Pack Recorder for taking snapshots, for repackaging, the Pack Designer, and the Pack Tailor. These modules are known to you as a user of RayPack. The Pack Point also, and the Pack Bench as a management tool for standardizing packaging. The news that we will be looking at today in detail is the PackBot, which is a very new module within RayPack and which allows for bulk repackaging and virtualization or bulk processing of software packages. And also the enhancement that we've made or that we've added to the Pack Wrapper. And yes, I would say that I hope that I gave you a pretty good overview on what we will on what RayPack Studio includes. And if there are questions right now before we go into the product, please let us know via the chat panel. Okay, no questions so far, so I will hand over to Martin now, and he's gonna give us a technical deep dive into the product. Thank you very much, Martin.
Yes, thank you. I'm just waiting for my presenter credentials to be passed to me. So I think my screen should be now on air. Yeah. So what I have here, I have a couple of windows from our products. Basically, we are talking about the release 5.1, which was an upgrade as compared to previous release 5.0. But just don't be fooled with this minor, well, relatively minor change in the versioning, because actually the new features we brought to our products can actually make the philosophy of working much different, and I would say much better. It's much easier to implement, much easier to use. And certain scenarios, specifically for freelancers or for service providers, are way more easier. And I'm going to show you, well, a couple of these new functions. You will certainly find more of them in our release notes. So I think at the end of this demo, we'll also have a quick slide showing where to get the trial, where to get the release notes. So I'm not going to cover all of them, but just, well, I would say I've picked up a couple of highlights which are important and which are just interesting and fun to work with. So I will go through evaluation with RayEval or software discovery. I will do a short packaging with RayPack, and at the end I will also do a Q&A quality control with RayQC. And starting with RayEval, this is I would say, in my opinion, the simplest product in the tool set, which is well, sole purpose is to create a documentation describing how to install the environment, install the products that we are going to either repackage or virtualize or customize, how to passively test it out, how to make sure that everything works fine, and to deliver a documentation in a standardized way for the packaging team and QA team to have a look at that and to make sure that everything is working after the packaging and after the QA phase. So that's the main window. As you can see, we are still showing our concept of having tools which are easy to start with, easy to learn. So there is a really clean view on the dashboard with just a couple of quick links, a last project, and it's pretty much similar to anything you may find in all other products. So if you are migrating or you have been using the 5.0 release, you will certainly find this already, well, like at home. If you migrate from the older version, there is a new UI, which is, well, again, much easier to work with than what we had previously. So let's start with RayEval. I'm going to now quickly create a new project and show you a couple of pitfalls that we previously had without the new features that were introduced. So I'm going to start a new project for an MSI-based package, but at this point it could also very well be an XD-based product, so there is actually no limitation. And let's take, for example, CD Burner XP. So by starting a new project, RayEval automatically picks up some relevant data. It can come either from an MSI, like I just did, or if you plug in the solution into RayFlow framework, some of the details can be automatically pulled when you are creating a new package order or starting to edit package orders from RayEval. So right now I'm kind of working offline. This is all happening on my physical machine. There is just one license, and still I will be able to work with multiple environments with all our products. And RayFlow, as already explained by my colleague, won't be today part of the presentation. So now let's quickly review what RayEval is suggesting to us. There are just some application details which are automatically read from an MSI package. Let's say we are just fine with them and go to the most interesting step, which would be how to actually document our installation, how to document the preparation for that. Previously, what we had with the packaging 5.0 was the concept of a simple tool which lets you capture your installation state. However, the issue was that everything you would do would be actually executed on that machine that RayEval was started from. And this is what I meant by making the implementation and usage easier. So instead of having RayEval installed on a machine of, well, let's say customer environment or a project environment, really important for service providers and for freelancers which are working with many virtual machines, what we came up with is a simple concept that let us start our work on the physical machine, which is licensed with RayPack Studio, and define as many virtual environments as you need and do the work on them. So I'm going to do that right now. Long story short, without a lengthy configuration, I'm going to explain later how to make it work, how to set it up. But at this point, it's important to notice that there is one new addition which you may not, was not present in previous versions, and that's the button which says virtual machines. So in order to start our work and do it with a virtual machine, it's as easy as pressing there, and it will bring me a selection of machines which are currently in my pool. Again, let's put aside how to configure the pool. I'm going to show you that in a second. Important is to have, so to say, library of machines and snapshot configurations, which pretty much represents what your customers, what your projects are representing. So what RayEval is able to do, RayEval is able to work with different kinds of virtual environments. Right now, these 4 machines are Workstation, so just a normal VMX file which I have on my local drive, but it's also possible to work with ES6 side and with Hyper-V machines, and they can also be selected from that point. For that presentation, I just took the shortest path to have a Workstation installed locally, and I have a couple of machines with snapshots defined. So as you can see, that would be just a Windows Server started, which would be powering the final snapshot. So what happens if I press Use Selected? With RayEval enabled, as you can see, the workstation is automatically brought into the foreground. I'm going to make it a bit smaller to have in the background my RayEval window. And what RayEval is doing, RayEval is powering up my machine and restoring it to the correct snapshot. So as I defined in my configuration, it was the final snapshot. Then RayEval would wait for the VMware tools to authenticate. And finally, I'm logged in using auto login functionality. Then, as you can see, it's almost done. And from this point, I'm connected to the virtual machine, and I can dismiss this dialog. So the difference between previous layout and the one I have now is that the button here is indicating that the virtual machine connection is active. And that gives me a, well, pretty much direct choice of starting the installation or documenting my setup in the virtual environment. So let's have a look what happens if I press the button to run the setup. Well, like previously with RayEval, there is some first auto-created step in my documentation, which is, well, to double-click on an MSI file. This is still not, well, that much big feature, but as a good start for our documentation, that will be something which is, well, a good beginning. Now let's bring the VMware window to the front. And as you can see, the setup has been started in the virtual environment. And what I can do now, I can perform my installation without worrying that configuration will not be any more clean after the installation. I can work with snapshots as much as I want, which was previously, well, difficult because the products, in order to fully configure it, to fully test, would have to be otherwise installed on a physical environment. So what is the philosophy of RayEval? Instead of working with Microsoft Word or screenshot captures or some, well, homemade solutions, it's as easy as to start a setup and then, as always, with a specified combination of buttons to simply capture the controls you need. So, for example, by pressing the next button, with I think in that configuration it has been configured for a control. As you can see, there is one step defined in my project which says click button next. So the text from a label has been automatically parsed and displayed here in the project. This just saves a few keystrokes. So we can also capture the full window, and this is also represented by the change in the background here. But we are not really limited to parts of the UI of the setup. It's also perfectly possible to capture parts of the operating system. And for example, as you can see, I've just captured part of the desktop of the shell, the icon on my desktop. So whatever is displayed there can be captured either directly by pressing that, or you can always select a tool to report a cropped element of your desktop. Now let's move on into next important step. So we are going to accept a license. And again, the license acceptance is going to be documented because that's something which is important for our packaging team to follow. And in the background, as you can see, RayEval has not only captured the checkbox itself, but the content of the checkbox has been read, and it's displayed here. It says, tick checkbox, I accept the terms in the license agreement. So that again saves a few keystrokes, but also is safe. There is no confusion here which checkbox to click, what to select, and so on and so on. Now, if we go next, so I can always use the same technique to press the next button with holding control button, and we can also now configure, like, for example, disable a couple of languages, some random choice, no offense, and, for example, capturing the window to indicate which languages are to be excluded from my installation. Obviously, at this point, it could be anything, program settings, and so on and so on. Now, continuing to the next screen, this brings actually me to the point where the program is to be installed. And since I'm in a virtual environment, I can safely do that without having to worry that my, well, workstation, my physical house gets dirty after this installation. So let's, again, document this and press install button to make the installation happening. And finally, the window has been captured here. So this is how it looks now. Obviously, it was a pretty simple example, but using the same concept, we could now start the product, configure it, for example, disable auto updates, which is pretty common in the enterprise environment. We can configure it further to disable a couple of file extensions, and so on, whatever the application is requiring. At the end, all these steps are collected in my project, which is still present in the RayEval window, which I do have here. And right now, I can say that I don't need the machine anymore. So the snapshot I did was just great for capturing the changes, but it's not needed anymore. So if you again press on the virtual environment indicator, you have an option to say that the machine has to be powered off. So let's try to do that. Power off, and the machine in the background is going to be automatically switched off. So now from now you can work with different machines. You can plug in another instances to the very same machine, and I don't need that progress anymore. So this is a good time to create a documentation out of that. Right now I'm still in RayEval, so this is a internal format. You can use that to still reorder or adjust the labels which we configure together. You can finally move them between different phases. Like I did everything in the preparation first step. You can configure your environment to have some more or less steps here and have it, well, presented in your document. Like in order to test the product, click that and that, enter that and that, and check if that and that is happening. So it's completely up to you how you test, but it all can be easily documented with help of RayEval. Now with 5.1 release, it's also very, very easy as suggested, so to do the same with the virtual environment. So let's try to export and have a look what's in our report. And well, we're going to save the report maybe to a different location, like here. And I'm going to open that file to show you another interesting feature which I did for this webinar. With help of Microsoft Office, of Word, it's also very easy to customize the documents which are created for your customers. Like I put here a webinar 30/1, 2018, just as an example of a customer logo or project logo, which you can easily inject or change colors or pretty much anything you want in the template of this report. This concept is going to be pretty much the same in all our products, so I'm going to use this documentation later on to do the product packaging. We can have a look. These are all the steps that I captured, plus the descriptions which were either automatically created by RayEval or that the user simply manually typed. That's both of these are possible. So that will be RayEval. As you can see, it's all good functionality powered by new features which allow to do pretty much the same, but in a virtual environment, and thus keeping the physical environment clean. And you just only need to have one license, as I just did, and you can have as many virtual environments as possible, which again makes it simple to license, to implement, and to use the product. Before we go next, just a quick look on the settings. And this is the place where you define your virtual machines. So it's actually going to be the same in all products in RayEval and RayQC. So I'm just going to show it once, and the settings here are global. So that means anything you define here will be also present in well, RayPack or RayQC. For example, the machine I've been using was that one, and this is, like I said, a workstation machine, which is just having a path to VMX file, a basic authentication like signing without domain, and the snapshot which is going to be used for the repackaging. And all the settings are pretty much the same for Workstation, for ESX and Hyper-V. There are a couple of more maybe for ESX and Hyper-V, but the idea is the same. So you just configure it once in your pool, and then any machine configured can be used by RayEval and by obviously the other products. So continuing our journey through RayPack Studio 5.1, now after evaluation, possibly after using this document and uploading it to the workflow system like Rayflow, I can move on to the packaging. So while in the packaging, I'm going to start with the tailoring module, which also got a massive overhaul, and you can also reuse the concept of virtual machines. And later I will show how PackBot, so already announced component of the virtual packaging factory, is working. So let's start a new project in RayPack. And as you may remember, what I've chosen for evaluation was already in an MSI format. That was just a small application to CD Burner XP. And I'm going to create a response transform because I already know that the product is in MSI format. If that is not the case, there's always a way to make a repackaging with Pack Recorder, or later I'm going to show you how to do the same with PackBot. So let's start with the response transform action. Up until now, it's pretty much the same as you had in RayPack 5.0. So the only thing that I'm going to do now is to select where the MSI is, and that's something in shared sources. This was CD Burner XP. I'm not going to use any command line parameters. I'm not going to use transforms either, so I can pretty much keep the two steps here. And we are going now to the most important step. So what is new here is, again, the button which you may recognize from RayEval, the one I clicked over there, which allows me to do my work from now on a virtual machine. So let's try how it works. The machine is powered off, and I'm going to simply click there. This brings again the same view that we had in RayEval. Going to select my Windows Server 2012 R2, and it's going again to revert my snapshot and boot the machine up. I'm going to be automatically logged into the product, and once it's all ready, so the machine is booted, it will start an MSI installation in a sandbox mode on the virtual environment. So just give it a few seconds. We can have a look at the progress over there. The tools will be started in a second, and the MSI file is going to be copied into my virtual environment so that I can, again, do my job in the virtual machine. That can be really important for setups which are in MSI format, but have some prerequisites, like a SQL database from a customer machine, or some prerequisites which are checked by launch conditions. You can also do the tailoring on a physical machine because we support so-called sandbox mode, but well, like I said, the dependencies and so make it somehow more difficult if there is anything. So the safe solution would be to use the virtual machine, which is as close to production as possible, or to the customer environment. So the dialog here is pretty much the same as we had in RayEval. It's just to confirm that I'm now able to work with my virtual machine. And let's try to do that. By pressing Start Tailoring, the MSI is going to be copied to my virtual environment and immediately started on that. So the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go for my installation, which is right now started, and try to pretty much reapply the settings which I captured during my evaluation. So for that, I can go to my documents. I can open the PDF file. It's again not that much difficult. I can also do that from my memory. But again, let's make a good practice out of that by saying that, oops, that's not my virtual machine. Here is it. By saying that we are just simply having a help in the background. Now it's maybe too small. Yeah, so what I did, I have definitely accepted my license agreement. I went to the next step, and here about the languages, the first two from the list were disabled. So let's just simply do the same. Going to the next screen, and finally I was about to install. Like I said, this is already in a semi-sandbox mode, so once I press install, it's really fast because the actual installation is disabled. That's the same mechanism you could also use on a physical machine to make it clean after trying to install the product. But in any case, once I press finish, the installation is done, and as you can see, this blinking RayPack icon means that the state of my installation has been correctly captured. So again, I have an option. I can leave the machine running, or I can power it up. I will say that, well, let's try to power the machine off. So again, as you can see in the foreground, the machine is not in use anymore. Since RayPack can use the same configuration, it's, like I said, pretty straightforward to set it up once for a global deployment so that all packagers have the same machines, if they are, for example, on ES6. Or you could, any packager can also have their own configurations, their own machines, which are extra and specific to him. That's just your choice, and both solutions are supported. Let's have a review of what has been captured by PackTailor. There are just 3 changes to the state of the features, so most likely the languages and something generic which the MSI is doing on behalf of mine. And the properties, one of them was to accept the license. No more changes. It's a really straightforward setup, and that's pretty much fine. We can just use it to quickly demo how to work efficiently with the virtual environment. So I'm going to go next and open that project in RayPack, just to review what exactly has been done and to apply a couple of additional settings which I'm going to check later on at the QA stage. That's the main view of Pack Designer, so the core component of RayPack. It shows you a clear overview of the setup I've just opened, including the complexity index, how complex the product is, which is also customizable, especially as service providers may be interested in setting these values on their own, setting the algorithm so that it's, well, closer to their SLA expectations. But the defaults are also just working fine, and you can use that to, for example, say all packages at some level should be having a higher or lower SLA. That's up to you to decide. In any case, it's all good, right? All good RayPack. It's still showing the our concept of being pretty easy to start with. So the dashboard is identifying which features are there in the setup we are trying to edit, and more powerful features are available for packagers either via Visual Designer, so the place where I'm now, including the ability to change files and folders, registries, and shortcuts. And so for packagers with MSI expertise, there's always an advanced view which offers views like for features, components, tables, and custom actions. A pretty much common packaging task would be to add some branding to our setup, so we can also try to do that. Like I said, there is always a choice whether we want to do anything from tables or from registry view. It's up to us. But what we are really encouraging is automation and reusing of snippets. So with RayPack, it's easy to set up a snippet, so a bit of, I wouldn't say code, more like changes, which are to be applied to any single setup you may have, and registry branding or active setup and so are perfect examples for that. And this is what I'm going to do now. I will actually implement 2 templates. So by going to a special menu and saying apply changes from transform template, I'm going to select first add branding. This is going to add a few registry entries, which I can now review. This is that part called webinar. And you can use that registry, for example, to make identification of software by your deployment tool easier. So for MSI, you could still use the GUI-based identification in registry, but many customers are simply using standardized ways and always, for example, saving a registry in that very location. So that's, again, up to you, but a good example of what the snippets can do to make your work semi-automated, automatically importing and restoring particular snippets of changes. Another example would be to, for example, disable a couple of properties. So I'm going to import another one. And this one is just simply changing 3 properties. This is actually important because later I have a checklist which is going to check these properties. So let's try to have a look what we just did. And this handy view shows me the changes which were done since my last session or that were present in the MST file. And precisely these 3 properties will be important, so just pay attention to them. They were not part of the original setup, but if we want to have them in all packages coming from our packaging factory, we will have a checklist which is going to check for them, and we may also have a snippet which sets them automatically like I just did. This can be also automated, so you don't have to actually click anything. You can use our command line interface to import the snippets automatically to an MSI file, MST, or some other formats which are supported by RayPack. So once I'm done with that, I will just press save my changes in the MST file, and that file will be then subject to changes to checks in my QA checklist. Now, we will say a bit more on RayPack because there is another component which is pretty big and pretty useful, and this is PackBot. So that new addition can be located in the dashboard. And PackBot is used for pretty much repackaging on a virtual environment, but to any format that RayPack is supporting. So you may do a repackaging to a classic MSI, but also make a bulk conversion of all your packages into, for example, FV format, or convert them all to MSI or to RPP or to RCP, anything that RayPack actually can support. So let's have a quick demo. I'm going to first start with just one package. There is an option to work with more of them, so it's pretty much then a bulk repackaging, but to have a better understanding, let's focus on one of them. I'm going to first have a look where the package is. We can take as an example, well, let's take, for example, that one, in the setup. What you can see immediately is that RayPack is clever enough to find out some common command lines, and it knows that that particular setup from inner setup can be installed silently using this command line. Unlike some other tools, we actually do not require that this setup is fully unattended. There can be also UI shown. In that case, obviously, you will have to go to that setup and do some clicks manually. Well, if there is a way to automate, that's just simply speeding up the work. And then you can set it up so that after each repackaging, the machine will be simply returned back to the pool, and it will continue with the next one. There is also an option which is called delay second snapshot, and it's also interesting if you want to make a repackaging on a virtual machine, but either you don't have a silent command line, or there is something extra that cannot be achieved by a command line, like after installing, you want to go and delete a couple of files, or you want to change some settings. So for that, instead of some homemade solutions trying to fire a CMD, which does all of this, you can simply start your setup and enable that option, delay second snapshot. What will effectively do, it will wait for you until you say, I'm done, meaning that the product will be installed, and RayPack will announce it to you that it's now waiting for your confirmation to continue. And when you are done with additional config or some other reboots and so on, you will just simply press that button to continue. Well, I'm going to make it fast, so I will not maybe use that option right now, maybe later. I can also demo a couple of other cool stuff. And before we continue, we may also go to the virtual machines tab, which at this point has two machines selected. This is something I defined by default. You can pretty much use two different scenarios. You might either now say, okay, I have a machine which I know is appropriate for that task. So then you just simply use the checkbox to say, use, for example, just only Windows Server 2012, or use the command box on the top. But one interesting thing here is that if you have more machines, and all of them are capable of running this packaging task, then you may say, all right, now all of these 4 machines are capable, and RayPack should decide on its own which machine to take. So if you have, for example, a queue of 10 packages, and you define that each of these 10 packages can be run by any of 4 machines, then the overall packaging will be most likely 4 times faster than original, because RayPack can process tasks in parallel as long as you have 4 unique virtual machines. So I'm going to first start with just one single selection of Windows Server 2012, and I'm going to leave the defaults like the exit codes, like log file checking, and so on, just intact to show you quickly what is the result of the job I'm just going to start. So let's try to repackage inner setup into MSI format. Now I'm going to bring this window to the front, and we can now sit and watch what PackBot is doing. It will be fully unattended. So the machine is going to be started. It's going to, again, log me automatically in. It's going to automatically start my setup with the command line switches, which are silent. After the setup is finished, the package will be created, and what will be the result of my job would be that I will have an MSI plus the log files, which are automatically collected from the virtual environment for me to review them, and they will be also copied to the physical machine and put in a place where my MSI is saved. So what's happening now? The setup files are copied to my virtual environment, and once it's there, they are going to be started really soon. So just give it a second. And right now, first snapshot is running. We are using absolutely the same technique of how Pack Recorder is working, meaning that it's all also controlled by your profile. You may have different profiles for different customers or different environments, with different exclusion lists, with different naming conventions, and so on and so on. And the default profile is actually affecting how our PackBot is behaving right now. So anything you define and is currently active will be respected by PackBot, including what to exclude, how to name your MSI, how to name the cap files, and so on and so on. What you can see now, it's already kept comparing snapshots, so the installation is actually over. And I didn't have right now a chance to make any configuration because I didn't use that option to delay my second snapshot, just as explained before. But once the snapshots are ready, the rest will be converted locally. So they are now converted, the RCP is there, and I selected an MSI format, so I'm going to just need to have an MSI package. So just give it a second, and the repackaging would be finished. So it is. We can now also have a review what's there. This is a log file from installation. It's not an MSI setup, so it's not also a RayPack log. It's just really coming from the installer I started, and RayPack simply knows where the log files are, and it can copy them over here. Since my setup was successful, there is not that much of interest for me, but in case the setup fails and exit code non-zero is returned, you can use log information to actually find out what's going on. Why is it important? Well, the importance of that is that if you are doing bulk repackaging and you have 30 tasks in the queue and one of them fails, RayPack will simply continue. So it will return the machine to pool, just not to waste your time and waste your attention on machines which are somehow blocked by faulty installations, but just to give you an idea what happened, it can collect the log files so that you can later have a look and understand what's actually happening and what went wrong. So in that scenario I did, it was not really necessary, but it's just important to know why this function is even there. And as an output, there is an MSI, and my current configuration says the files should be extracted and stored externally without cap files, and this is what RayPack pretty much did here. So you can have a look what has been captured by my setup, and it's all right now extracted. So current profile always dictates how the layout is looking like. And that was it. So my very first repackaging with PackBot on a virtual environment with just one setup. Now, if I go back and try to repeat, there is also a couple of interesting things to consider. First of all, we can add a whole directory. And for example, I will say, let's add all the executables. Let's import all of them. Press import. And as you can see, there is now a queue of, well, a bunch of different files, all in executable format. All of them right now are converted to the MSI, but if you go to a detail tab of any file, the important part is, as I already said, a choice of format. So by default, it's an MSI, but you can, for example, say that you need just an RCP to be able to have a generic format, and out of that RCP, there is an option to create, well, MSI, virtual formats, UWP, and so on and so on. But you can also decide to directly convert to any of these, so including MP5, SYNAP, or UWP. So you can select that here to change what is actually the output of that operation. I'm still going to keep the MSI here, and with one difference to the previous one, that difference would be that I'm going to select two virtual machines. And this is why I'm going to show you how PackBot can work in, so to say, concurrent mode. So two machines there, and they are unique, so different the VMX files, a bunch of files which I just added to the queue, and now let's have a look what happens. So as you can see now, you can still say that you don't want to run more than, for example, 2 projects. That's just in case your machine is not strong enough and, well, just 2 virtual machines can run at the same time. And if I press process, it's going to start with first one, CCleaner. Oops, my window is not in focus. And as you can see, two packages are processed simultaneously. So two machines in the background, and the sources are copied separately. And that process of how many packages? I think 7 packages. Because I have two machines, I will finish it in possibly twice as fast as with just using one machine and so. Finally, you may decide that some tasks may require more or less machines. Like a good example is that what we are supporting, you can convert to an FV format using Microsoft Sequencer installed on a virtual image in a particular snapshot. So if you define that a particular FV conversion should take that snapshot, RayPack is clever enough and can reorganize the packages so that overall the whole process is as fast as possible without waiting for some machines or some packages which don't have any free resource at this point. So this is how the bulk packaging, bulk processing of my stuff would work. I will cancel this. We don't have that much time to wait for all of them. So sorry, it's all canceled. And now go again to settings to again confirm that RayPack can share the same configuration as RayEval. So this is the place to define that. You may add some more machines over there. And also what you can define is, you may say that particular types, so I'll make it a bit bigger, like a V5 conversion, that it always should use the snapshots with FV, which I configured before that webinar. It's just a shortcut. When you select a format at V5, it will automatically adjust your selection of machines to that very format. So you don't have to actually lose too much time and managing the snapshots and thinking which is the right machine. You just define it over there and have it, like I said, once per profile. So that is the packaging with PackBot in a really, really quick overview. We are now going to go back to my flow, which I started with RayEval with CD Burner XP. We have already a document which says how to configure and install the product. We have created a transform with PackTailor, which pretty much covers what was requested from me during evaluation, but also which has a couple of additional features like a registry edit and a few properties which will be checked by us. And what I'm going to do now would be simply a checklist as a part of QA quality control assurance, and that part I'm going to do with RayQC. So let's minimize the windows over there, and let's go to RayQC. Oh, I wanted to minimize, sorry. Let's go back again to RayQC. I have created a small checklist before the webinar to make it faster, and that's the checklist. It's going to do pretty simple stuff, but let's keep it simple to actually show you the idea of what has changed with introduction of new features. So the checklist can be pretty much run standalone on this very machine I am. Like, for example, I can say that my MST path can be selected from the local drive, and I can check if that MST exists over there. Let's first start without an MST. I'm going to make a quality control of a product which is not fully finished. The packager maybe forgot to save the MST file, or the MST file is not having all the changes that are required. So I'm going to first skip this third step and instead continue with the fourth one. And with help of plugin, I just click on this little triangle. The RayQC uses automation to execute particular plugin. In that case, checks if the file exists. So since the file exists, it has been automatically marked as existing by selecting the yes option. And the option is now green, meaning that it's expected, it's fine. We're going back now to 3 steps over there, which are pretty much simple reading of properties from the MSI. So again, it's automated. I don't have to type in anything manually, and I can simply execute them one by one. What I'm doing right now is, I would say, manual work, so clicking or typing some details, but there is also a way to start it all in unattended mode, either from command line or with UI, but all plugins at once, and so on and so on. I'm just doing this step by step to show you the idea. So that checklist, I configured that checklist to first create a command line to install the product so that I can first review whether everything is fine. As you can see, there is no transform in that, so that means I'm just going to simply install an MSI without transform first. We will now scroll to next part, the verify properties group, and again, I can, for example, call maybe the whole group at once, and it's going to produce me some red results. That's because, like I said, when I was doing packaging with RayPack, I have added 3 properties, and I've said that I would eventually check whether the properties are set, but since now the checklist doesn't know anything about the MST file which contains these fixes, it simply outputs me an error. It could be also some more complex check for your environment, like checking if the registry exists, checking if the MSI is correctly behaving, and so on and so on, just to give you an idea how you can combine checklists, groups, and plugins together to make parts of the whole checklist automated. So now let's first maybe try to fix this before we go to the actual installation. Going back, there is a place to select where the MST file is. Where did I save it? I think it was RayPack project or yeah. I'm going to move it to the same place in my root so that MST and MSI are in the same place. So let's save it in here. And that path, I will use the shared location because later I will start another machine and that shared location would be visible by me. So I'm just going to enter my password. Yeah. So now let's try to repeat. We will first try to verify the properties to see if it's all fine. And as you can see, automatically it's green, meaning that the checklist is done. And I need to also maybe create another command line to include my trends. That's just very straightforward. And right now, once the checklist is completed up to this point, there is a sample showing how to test the actual installation. So what I'm going to do, the product is going to be installed on a virtual environment. And in that simple checklist, I'm just checking if the exit code was 0. Obviously, at this point, it's up to you, to your creativity, to add some more checks, whatever the customer project, whatever the environment might be requiring. But before I start it, well, let's first use the same concept from RayEval. So I will first go to the virtual machines mode by clicking that button. Again, I'm going to use my Windows server. Is it powered off? Well, it's not, but I can actually restore the snapshot manually. This is just a quick workaround. If you have a machine with a running snapshot, you may save some time by reusing that snapshot. But I'm not going to do that. I want to always start with a clean snapshot. So either select another snapshot or just power off your machine so that RayQC knows that the snapshot has to be restored. So this is going to bring me again the same procedure. The machine is booting. It's going to log me in, and I'm going to be in RayQC checklist really soon. Let's just again give it a few seconds to spin. Yeah, this machine is not really the fastest one, and it somehow takes a few seconds for VM tools to start. But at the end, within how much? 30 seconds, my environment is pretty much ready, and it should be faster if you, for example, start with ESX and the tools are configured properly. So it just takes a few more seconds, and now it's armed. So let's now try to, well, I'm going to first check if I have, again, connection with my server. Yeah, I do have now, so I can see the sources. Yeah, perfect. And I'm going to start the installation. So let's do it. The installation is actually started on the VM. As you can see, CD Burner XP has shown up, so that the installation was, I think, fine. We can now open the installer log. It's also part of my customization of the checklist. So as you can see in the VM, I can now read the log file from the installation. But since the exit code was 0, I pretty much know that it's all fine here, and I can close it. Back to RayQC, and now comparing that the installation has finished without errors. I can repeat the same for the uninstallation part. So again, now this is going to uninstall the product on the VM, and the shortcut is gone, as you can see. And using the same technique, it will, for example, check the log file, which is again positive. And finally, I can check that the log file was indeed successful. So that's the way to work with checklists. It's not that much different from what you've been used to with Packaging Suite 5.0. It's just there is more flexibility that anything, a group, a plugin, or a checklist can be started in a virtual environment. The last feature that I wanted to show, this one is pretty smaller but still useful. What about packages which are already in a executable, and there is no option to repackage them? Either that you don't want to do that, or the customer is not willing to pay for that, or from some technical reasons it's not really desired. So for that, we have another module which lets you quickly create a wrapper. Wrapper is simply a standardized interface over the installation of your setup. We are using here PowerShell wrappers executing PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit with an executable entry point. And the good point is that, like I said, the command line of that installation wrapper is always the same. So we can pretty much push your packages to your administrator, who can import them into SCCM on our RMS console without knowing how to install the product, without knowing which silent switches are there, and so on and so on. So let's make a quick demo. We can work with either with MSI files or also with non-MSI files. Let's maybe try first an MSI file. It reads automatically the details, the version, language, name, and so on and so on. And also how to install the product, the command line to install and uninstall. For executable, it might obviously look a bit different, but RayPack is still able to verify popular silent command switches for popular setups. And that's the target, so the place where my files are stored. I will just leave it with default, just to show you what actually gets generated at the end. And what we do have here is, like I said, a wrapper. We just have one entry point to deploy my application. It has all the files included in here, so cat files, MSIs, MST, whatever is needed for my setup. And finally, the routine, which is written using PowerShell, describes how to install the product. If you've been ever using PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, you will find this well familiar, because that's pretty much the toolkit. Just a couple of enhancements from Raynet are there to make it even easier to work with complex scenarios. But other than that, if you need anything extra, you can always either customize this or make upgrade of the engine of the toolkit, and so on and so on. It's really flexible and using really modern PowerShell to make the installation tweaked to the very degree that you need. It's now 1 minute after 5. So our plan was to finish like 15 minutes before to let you ask questions and to give me some time to answer these questions. So my colleagues were actually observing chat window, and I'm pretty much sure that there are a lot of questions.
Yes, there's quite some few questions that came in, and one of them was actually asked when you were showing the RayPack itself. It would be good to identify when and by whom each particular package transform package was built. All too often, engineers fail to log valuable info in the property table. Can you address it? Because it's like out of RayPack. So we're out of RayPack right now.
Yeah, but actually it's just one of the possible use cases of what you can do with our concept of snippets. So either automated, if you have a workflow, you can even plug this in to run it automatically. A snippet which, for example, imports in some particular place, like a property table, but not necessarily, it can be anything that you configure. So for example, import credentials, or a place where a user can put his credentials, and so on and so on. Just one of possible use cases of the feature I was actually showing.
Okay, thank you very much. You know everything, Martin. So the next question is regarding the PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. The .ps1 template, can it be modified to incorporate customer standards such as branding keys?
Well, it's a good question. So right now, in the 5.1 release, you cannot change it until you create a setup. But the good thing is that the next update, which is well, soon to be published, adds this functionality. So you'll be able to fully customize, create a template, add your custom config, add custom functions, even custom files, and have it respected by RayPack. So it's coming soon.
Okay. Does it always use the latest version of the PowerShell app deployment toolkit?
At this point, it's using the latest version as RayPack was released. So once the new upgrade comes, we'll certainly make an upgrade of the toolkit itself. You can still decide to make an upgrade on your own because toolkit is pretty much flexible. You can just simply replace one folder with a newer version, and it will just simply be correctly picked up. Or once we are done with our templating, so ability to give you a customized way to set up own templates, you could also make an upgrade on your own without waiting on RayPack and so on.
Good. Thank you very much, Martin. Now we've got a licensing question. Are your licenses available per user? Our licenses are machine-bound licenses, actually. So that means you tie like a license to a machine, and then it can be used by this machine and maybe even 2 users. I'm not supposed to say this, really. So, but there is also a floating license option that can be booked, which makes a concurrent use of the licenses possible. So we have this in our license model for the last year, so since 2017, and it's been accepted very well. There is a limit of, well, you know, a minimum of 3 licenses needs to be acquired in order to be able to use the floating license model. So I hope this answers your question. So here is another question. The importance, oops, hang on a second. No, it's not jumping. So the importance of adding additional info to the property table is when several hundred apps have been produced, there needs to be a method of identifying where, when, who packaged the bill, specifically in banking, finance sector.
Well, yeah, this is what we are actually doing for some of our internal projects to, like I said, either store ID of packager or just 2 letters identifying that packager. Well, it's again, this can be imported into the template. So each user may have his own templates, including his own letters, IDs, or whatever, and every single time import that into either MSI or MSC or, well, which technique is to be used. But that's pretty much possible with this concept of snippets. And definition of that is also straightforward. You just open any project, it can be the one that you want to edit or not. You do the change that you want to have in all products, and then you kind of export that change into the snippet. So you don't need to actually script anything, just do your work in RayPack and save it to be reused later on.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. So yes, we're just being asked about our trial license, which can be acquired through our website. Very good question. And what features are included in it? Yes, the RayPack Studio trial license is the enterprise version of the product. So it includes the RayEval, it includes the RayPack and RayQC. What is not included in it is RayQC Advanced, which is our tool for application compatibility testing and collision management. But if you would like us to carry out checks for you, you can let us know and we can create the reports for you by using our RayQC Advanced tool. So I hope this answers your question. Oh yes, and our trial licenses are valid for 21 days. So if you would like to receive a trial license, you can have it for 3 weeks of testing. So now we have a question coming in regarding RayFlow and why it hasn't been part of this demo and of the release. Yes, we released in December last year RayPack Studio 5.1, and our RayFlow product is still on version 5.0. This is because there will be a release of RayFlow still in Q1 of this year. Still in the first half of this year. This is what I meant to say. And then RayFlow will also go to the new version. And at the same time, I should think, Martin, you can judge this better than I can. There will also be an update of RayPack Studio.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
And
it will certainly bring that functionality for PowerShell customization that was asked just before.
Very good. Okay, so we have another question. We have another few questions. Let me just sort this out. Right. Can the values in the RayQC checklist be automated, or is it that a manual only process for each package for functions like install, uninstall, etc.?
Yeah, they can be automated. I just did some really pretty scenario of, for example, here, that value comes automatically from the path I entered and from the second path for the MST file. But you can make this all based on either results of previous checks, or if you are starting the checklist in another mode, you can use command line interface to specify, well, fill these values that and that for me with that and that. So then you can integrate it in your either build server or automation test environment to actually have a good start with some pre-populated values. Or you can then simply run the whole checklist automatically without UI. So it's just a matter of configuration and defining what you need to have in your checklist.
Good. Right. Here is another question. How well does RayPack handle install shield script-driven MSIs executed via setup.exe?
Well, there is no dialogue in many MSIs. There is no dialogue coming from the install shield script. We normally say that there are, well, two choices. You can either stick with that MSI and try to do anything you can with the MST file. That includes a couple of popular properties. So you can also add your own features to install, just to, I would say, use the Windows installer features to deploy registry, to deploy files, shortcuts, and so on and so on. But you may also very well decide that that MSI is not really that much valid for you, and you may, for example, say, I want to repackage it. Sometimes it's against best practices to do that. Sometimes you might say that for something which just pretends to be an MSI, you may do that. It's up to you to decide. So without a concrete reference and having a look at concrete products, I wouldn't say I have some general answer, but like I said, either use Windows installer as your container to customize your installer after the main install script setup is done, or treat it as non-MSI, repackage, and then do whatever you want in your MSI.
Okay. How soon is RayPack Studio 5.1 available? It is already available. We released it on the 12th of December, so it is already available. Is there a list of installer types that RayPack is capable of auto-detecting? For example, setup, null, soft, MSI?
I don't have the list now in front of my eyes, but certainly NSYS, so null, soft, setup, Windows installer, and a couple of others are detected. So of NSYS and setup are anyway there. For the others, I would have to check it up. I don't have the list right now in front of my eyes.
Okay. Here's your chance to ask a couple of more questions. But I think there are no further questions. So yes, thank you very much. And if questions arise after this webinar, you can always let us know about it. So we hope that we could give you a good insight into the new version of RayPack Studio 5.1. And we will let you have the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation that serves as our basis today. And also we will let you have the recording of this session afterwards. So yes, thank you so much for joining us today, and wishing you a nice day or nice afternoon or nice evening, depending on your time zone. And yes, speak to you very soon, we hope. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.